Hi there, Smart Drivers. Rick with Smart Drive Test talking to you tonight about motorcycles. And now that we're getting ready for spring and the sun is shining and the snow is gone, some of us are thinking about pulling our motorcycles out of storage. And yes, for some of you in the south of the 49th parallel, no doubt you have already had your motorcycles out. And I would like this as well for a bit of a reminder for all the car drivers that we've been on the roadways without bicycles and without motorcycles for the winter, and they are coming back again. So do be careful and do start looking out for motorcycles and bicycles on the roadways as we're going into spring here. Now, if you're new to Smart Drive Test and haven't been to Smart Drive Test before, Smart Drive Test helps new drivers get a license regardless of class, helps veteran drivers to remain crash-free, and CDL drivers to start a career as a truck or bus driver. Now what I'm going to do here is I see that we're a bit washed out here in terms of the light, so I'll just turn the light down here a little bit and see if we can fix that. So just bear with me for a moment. There we go. All right, so Corey's here. Corey is the moderator. We've had some some spammers, so you know that your channel's going all right when you get spammers on the channel. So Corey does a really great job of looking after that as well. If I refer to a video or whatnot, Corey's really good at getting those up for you as well. So Bricks for Wheels, that's Corey, and Corey is the moderator. Paulo, how are you? Going really well. S. James out of storage, not in Winnipeg. James is it a little bit cooler there in Winnipeg? It's not really summer here or spring here, even in Vernon here in the Okanagan Valley. We had snow again today, so still snow in New York and even Charlotte, North Carolina. So even the places that should be getting spring are not getting spring. If they're not getting spring yet in Charlotte, North Carolina, you know that it is late going. Yes, Dave, I am going to show you what gear that you should wear on your motorcycle, and I'm going to talk to you about a few other things. The other thing, just that's a really good point, Dave. This is kind of a high level talk on motorcycles. I could spend an entire presentation just talking about helmets or talking about jackets. So this is a very high level. This just kind of gets you going and gets you thinking about motorcycles and gets other people thinking about motorcycles. And if you haven't answered the poll already I did put a poll on the community tab there. If you haven't answered that yet, by all means do that. I am looking for a motorcycle to start doing training. I don't own a motorcycle. I haven't owned a motorcycle for a couple of years, but I'm pretty sure the overwhelming feedback, and I'll show you this in the presentation, was 60% a standard motorcycle. And actually, I really like the standard motorcycles as well. So it gives you kind of sitting in an upright position. And for new riders, this is something else that I would recommend for starting out with a new motorcycle. And I did talk to the people at the motorcycle shop about, beginner motorcycles for new drivers who are starting out. So Dave, there's no chat now because YouTube has changed it that the chat will attach to the video after it's produced on the channel. So that's one of the new features of the new YouTube, some of the new features that they rolled out in the last couple of weeks here, which is a really nice feature. So that's why the comments aren't up on the video anymore. Okay. Tommy, Computer Geek, is from Oshawa. That's really great. Wesley from Jamaica. Okay, Wesley, are you looking to get a CDL license in the United States, or are you looking to get a CDL license there in Jamaica? All right, so weekend's going well. Okay, any other questions? All right. Well, that didn't take long tonight for the spam to start rolling in, so Corey's got that. And as well, we got a few other filters in place that are keeping that out as well, so that's really great. Thanks so much, Corey, for that. Okay, without further ado, so basically, if you're new to Smart Drive Test, if you're new to the video, if you're watching on the replay, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Be sure to hit that like button. That way you can, we'll keep doing this great stuff for you. And if you have any suggestions or videos that you'd like me to do about driving and those types of things, Wesley, yes, in Jamaica there. Excellent. CDL license. So essentially what I would suggest, Wesley, for getting a CDL license is probably the easiest way to do it is go to a truck driving school. I know it's a bit more expensive, but one thing about truck driving schools is you're going to get the shortest path to getting a truck driving license. And because these truck driving schools teach you how to pass a road test, and I mean, after you get your license, that's when the real learning starts on driving a truck, because you're out by yourself and you sort of got to figure things out by yourself. So that's what you can do. All right. And, you know, maybe the other thing, Wesley, is just to send me an email, rick@smartdrivetest. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. I'll have some look about that. Corey, can you delete? Thanks. There we go. Oh, we must be doing well tonight. So, okay. And so yeah, hit that thumbs up button, hit the like button, and if you have any topics that you would like me to talk about on driving, starting a driving career, motorcycles and those types of things, by all means, drop me a note in the comments or whatnot, and I'll be more than happy to talk about those topics and try and get you going on whatever you're doing here. So that's what we're trying to do. Danny, how do you apply for a motorcycle license? Okay, that's a good question. That wasn't something I covered in the presentation, Danny. Basically, it's the same as getting a car license. It's here in British Columbia and in other places, it's a graduated licensing system. So essentially, you have to go in and write a learner's permit. Much of the learner's license for a motorcycle is very similar to getting a car license. There are some other requirements in terms of being a rider on a motorcycle. Obviously, you have to know about helmets, you have to know about gear, you have to know a little bit about counter steering and weather conditions and those types of things. There are a few other things, but if you already have your car license, writing a learner's for a motorcycle license is fairly straightforward and fairly easy. And basically all you have to do is pick up the motorcycle handbook in your jurisdiction and have a read through that. If you've already got your car license, you're going to find it fairly quick, fairly easy. Now, one of the other things I do really recommend in terms of getting a motorcycle license is I really advocate for you to take a motorcycle course, because there are just so many things that they can teach you about being defensive due to the fact that you are 35 times more likely to be killed in a motorcycle crash than you are in a car crash. So the more skills, the more tools that you can put in your toolbox to stay safe while you're on a motorcycle is just going to, save you a whole world of grief, because it may, really, prevent you getting involved in a crash and being killed potentially. So I do recommend that in terms of getting a license as well. No, Dave, you're not allowed to ride motorcycles on the footpath. You're not allowed. You're not. I don't know anywhere where you're allowed to ride mopeds on the sidewalk either, and because you're not allowed to ride bicycles on the sidewalk. I have been yelled at by bylaw officers about riding my bicycle on the footpath with my kids who ride bicycles, who I really don't want to ride on the road with. So yeah, okay. And thanks for that, Corey. S. James, that is very true. You want to when you ride a motorcycle, you want to look cool, and I'll tell you a story about that, about looking cool on a motorcycle. Now, and I'll talk about different kinds of motorcycle helmets. There's basically full face helmets, and then there's open face helmets, right? And most of the time, I would really recommend having a full face helmet. Now, a couple of years ago, I was working at the driving school, and there was a guy that came in, and he retired from the military and got a huge pension package from the military, like $50,000 or something. I don't know what it was. But anyway, he decided to go out and buy a brand new motorcycle. So he goes out and buys a brand new $32,000 Harley Davidson. And so unfortunately, the day that he came in to the office to show off his new motorcycle, I was the only one in the office. And unfortunately, I couldn't really get too excited about it. However, talking about what James was talking about, S. James here was talking about in terms of the cool factor, he comes in riding a Harley Davidson. And if you ride a Harley Davidson, there's a whole culture that goes with Harley Davidson. You know, you got to wear jeans and you got to wear a black leather jacket and you got to have a, you know, a beanie helmet. You know, you belong to a certain Harley Davidson culture when you ride a motorbike, a Harley Davidson motorcycle. Anyway, he comes in on his new Harley Davidson, his brand new Harley Davidson. He's wearing a green reflective jacket and he's got one of those motorcycle helmets with the jaw that flips up. And I was like, you know, I was thinking to myself, you better not go into any Harley bars because you will get beat up wearing that. So very much what S. James was talking about in terms of the cool factor. So know if you're riding a Harley Davidson, there's a certain amount of you know, garb that you have to wear that's required in terms of actually, yes, James, yes, he was. It was even worse because he wasn't wearing a full face. He was wearing a full face with the flip up chin piece. That's what he was wearing. So not cool. It wasn't cool at all. So yes, Matt, and we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of the gear and whatnot. And yes, James, it was very much a faux pas in terms of what he was wearing on that. So, Ramesh, I think a motorcycle license, just check your handbook in your local jurisdiction, but it's the same as a car license. You can start getting a motorcycle license when you're 16. It's the same. Now, there is, I didn't finish saying there, when you ride a motorcycle, you are in a graduated licensing program, okay? So for the first year while you're riding your learners, you have to be accompanied by another, an experienced rider. So they have to be with you while you're riding your bike. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this in terms of bikes and those types of things. Hannah, how are you tonight? Hannah, have you gone for your license yet? So all good. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to switch over to the PowerPoint presentation here. Just bear with me one sec here. I get all this stuff going. There we go. Okay. That. Okay, there we go. All right. All right, so tonight we're talking about motorcycles, and we already established the fact that spring has not come to much of North America. I'm sure there are other parts of the world in Australia. They're going into winter in Australia, in the southern hemisphere, and those types of places. But you know, parts of Europe and whatnot, I'm sure there's some places in the world that are getting summer and spring and those types of things. If you are getting spring and thinking about pulling your motorcycle out, by all means, leave a comment down in the comment section there and tell us that, especially if you're watching on the replay, which is great. So, motorcycles. This motorcycle here, and I'll just mention the kind of different types of motorcycles. I did have a poll there on the community tab about different types of motorcycles and what people would recommend for training. And this is kind of a standard motorcycle. This is very much what you see in Mission Impossible and, you know, Fast 5, the Fast and the Furious types of motorcycles that they're riding. These are very popular right now and kind of the fad of motorcycles that you want. All right. So for those of you new to Smart Drive Test, my name is Rick August. I do have a PhD. I drove truck through most of the 90s, and talking about motorcycles tonight, I did have a motorcycle when I was younger, and I have ridden motorcycles, you know, throughout most of my life. When I moved to Australia in 2000, I was there for 5 years. I drove Greyhound for most of that time while I was supporting my career of going to university. I got my driving instructor license in 1997. I've been a driving instructor ever since. And in 2006, I graduated from the University of Melbourne with a doctorate in legal history. And my legal history, for those of you who don't know, is the study of policing, courts, and prisons. And my expertise is in policing as it relates to traffic, oddly enough. So, you know, I'm kind of fascinated by traffic. And actually, I'm motivated by drivers, road users, and what motivates behavior on the roadway and how that works, especially if any of you heard me talk about social driving. I'm particularly fascinated by that. So this week I got 2 videos up. I talked about the Uber crash, the autonomous vehicle that struck and killed a pedestrian in Tempe, Arizona this week, and talked about that and talked about, you know, what impact this is going to have on the research and development of autonomous vehicles, and had a great discussion about that, and lots of people left comments and talked about that and talked about the future of it. And if you haven't seen that video, by all means have a look at that video. as well have a look at the other video where I argued that autonomous vehicles won't be coming anytime soon, at least to mass consumerism. Now, I did have a conversation with somebody today, interestingly enough, that one of the ways that autonomous vehicles could be foisted onto the mass market is that if it becomes an insurance requirement. So if insurance gets involved and says, listen, if you want to drive your car on your own, insurance is going to be 3 times as much. If you drive an autonomous vehicle, your insurance will be 1/3 of that. So that's one of the ways that we were thinking that was going to happen. And then I did another video on road test disaster where unfortunately somebody panicked at the beginning of the road test and drove their car through a building. So not a great start to the road test, and unfortunately not successful. So those are the 2 videos that I got up this week. So we're, as you all know, we're talking about motorcycles, and motorcycles is a high risk endeavor, and there's little doubt some of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight, and somebody asked me to talk about gear, and we're certainly going to talk about gear. And I have a video that I shot with a friend of mine, Alex Matuzak, and he is an expedition bike, a BMW expedition touring bike, and he's gone through all the gear with us, and he has some really great gear, and we've gone through all of that. And so I've got that video, and I'm just going to put that up this week and get that ready for you. So know that on a motorcycle, it's not a matter of if you're going to come off the bike, it's a matter of when you're going to come off the bike. So it's just a matter of time. No matter how long you ride and those types of things, eventually you're going to come off your bike. If you were involved in a crash on a motorcycle, you are 35 times more likely to die in a crash on a motorcycle. And that's not shocking to me. It may be shocking to some of you, and if it is shocking to you, then just leave a comment down in the comment section in there, and we can have a discussion about that by all means, especially if you're watching on the replay. So there's nothing to protect you. So this is one of the reasons that I and myself and other avid motorcycle riders all harangue you to buy the best gear that you can to ride your motorcycle, because if you get into a crash, the only thing between you and the pavement is the gear that you're wearing, your boots, your pants, your jacket, your gloves, your helmet. And those are the things that you really need to wear when you're on your motorcycle. And I know it's easy to get lax, throw your helmet on, you got whatever you're on and whatnot, and you need to run down to the store and get a jug of milk or something. You need to wear your gear, and at minimum, wear your gloves, your helmet, and your jacket, because if you go down on a motorcycle, I'll tell you from personal experience of seeing other people who have gone down, road rash will take off a lot of skin, especially if you go down at a high speed. So the other thing that I advocate, and I already mentioned this, was to take a motorcycle course, because there's a lot of skills and abilities and techniques that these courses can teach you that will keep you safe and teach you where the highest risk places are on the roadway. And one of the highest risk places obviously is going to be left-hand turns at intersections, either you doing left-hand turns turning in front of other traffic, or other traffic doing left-hand turns and driving into you because they don't see you. And I'll talk to you about the biological reasons of why other traffic potentially drives into you. And there was a couple of years ago, and I'll see if I can find the clip where the family did actually release the GoPro video of the person who was driving probably at a higher speed than they should have, but somebody turned left in front of them and they were killed in a car crash. So know that eventually you are going to go down. And I'll tell you a story about that. When I was young and I had my first motorcycle, I think I was 17 at the time, we bought an older motorcycle and fixed it up and got it all out of the garage and those types of things and got it running. And, going for the inaugural ride, we took it out of the garage, went around the shop and drove back up, and I'm on gravel, and of course, and I touched the front brake, come up to a ride, and dumped the motorcycle over, and to my much chagrin had to try and struggle to pick the motorcycle back up off the ground. It was very embarrassing, but learned a lesson about don't use the front brake on gravel and those types of things. Okay, so again, for those of you who are riding, again, the driving task is very much at the fore of what you need to deal with, not only on a car, but it becomes even more apparent on a motorcycle. You got to look out for other drivers, the different types of vehicles that are on the roadway. What are the blind spots? Where are you going to ride in those blind spots? And know that the larger the vehicle, the bigger the blind spots. Traffic, road, light, and weather. And you can see the very romantic picture of the woman sitting on the motorcycle here at sunset. Know that at sunset, you are going to be even harder to see, because people's eyes are adjusted to the light sky and and not the dark landscape. And you on a motorcycle can be very hidden in a dark landscape. So one of the other things when you're considering riding gear is you want to try and have as much reflective strips and whatnot on your riding gear so that other vehicles can see you while you're riding your motorcycle in conditions like these. And one of the interesting things that Alex has on his motorcycle jacket is he actually has reflective strips that will actually zip in and zip out on his motorcycle jacket, which is really quite nice, and I'll show you that in the video when I get that up for you. All right, so this is some of the riding gear that you should have on your motorcycle. Helmets, and I'll talk a little bit further about helmets, open versus closed helmets. It's not a full-faced helmet versus one that's open. You want to have a good jacket. You want to have boots, gloves, pants, and rain gear. And I apologize, somebody just mentioned leather jackets. There are a lot of good synthetic jackets now. And the other thing about motorcycle jackets, yes, leather was once sort of the standard of motorcycle jackets. You definitely want to wear either a leather jacket or you want to wear a motorcycle jacket. Now, the other thing about many of these jackets now is it's not just they're protective, they also have armor in them. So it's tough plastic armor that will protect you in terms of road rash if you go down on the roadway. Because essentially when you go down on the roadway, what you want to try and do is if you're going any speed is you want to try and get the motorcycle between you and whatever is going forward in front of you. So if you're heading for a car, you want to try and get yourself between the motorcycle between you and the car. You basically want to try and get your feet on the seat as you're sliding down the road. And you'll see this if you watch motorcycle racing. You'll see these guys, and they'll slide on the track, and then they'll wait a moment because they're kind of waiting to make sure that they actually stop before they try and get up. Because our instinct is when you go down on a motorcycle is you instantly want to get back up. You actually kind of got to pause a minute, make sure that you've actually stopped rolling or sliding before you actually start getting back up. And if you have these jackets with this protective armor in them, they will protect you better than normal leather jackets and those types of things, because they don't have that armor in them that will protect you from rocks and sticks and other protrusions that potentially could be on the roadway. The other thing you want to wear is you want to wear boots, because they'll support your ankles if you go down, especially if you're riding off-road or whatnot and you get smacked with something like a limb off a tree or whatnot. You want to wear gloves. And you want to wear gauntlet gloves, one that goes up past your wrist. And the reason for that is to stop the wind from going up your arms and whatnot. And the other thing about all of this gear, most of it's windproof and most of it's water resistant. So if it does start raining and the wind is really what's going to make you cold on a motorcycle. So you want to have good gear, especially this time of year when it's the temperature is only 5 degrees Celsius or 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the other thing. The wind is really going to cut into you and it's going to make you really cold. So you want to wear lots of clothing and gear. Okay? Pants, you want to have motorcycle pants, and again, they're going to protect you if you go down in a crash or go down in a slide. And then finally, if it's raining, you want to have really good rain gear as well, because when it starts raining on a motorcycle and you're doing 50, 60 miles an hour, 80, 100 kilometers an hour, rain is really hard on your face. So know that as well. Okay, braking. This is another reason that a lot of inexperienced drivers who don't have a lot of experience riding motorcycles are going to go down is because of standard brakes. One of the options that you now want to look for on a new motorcycle is ABS brakes, anti-lock braking systems. This is the newest feature on newer motorcycles, and this prevents the wheels from locking up and has many studies have shown that riders are much safer with ABS brakes because they tend not to lock up the front wheel as much. So this is another feature that you might want to consider when you're purchasing a new motorcycle. Okay, helmets. As you can see here, there are many different kinds of helmets. The ones up at the top here, these are all open-faced helmets. I really advocate, if you're riding a motorcycle, to wear a full-face helmet. Unless you're riding a Harley, then you want to have a full-face helmet. But and the cool factor, you got to kind of keep the cool factor in place too. And you got to, if you're thinking about a Harley, well, then that's a different story in terms of what you're riding in terms of motorcycles and those types of things. Now, here in British Columbia, they recently passed a law, and I know they have a similar law in the United States, that the helmet has to be DOT rated. It has to have the DOT sticker on it, or you can't wear the helmet. It's not legal to ride on your motorcycle. or it has to have a Snell rating, and a Snell rating is actually a higher rating than the DOT. And as I said, most of the time you want to wear a full-face helmet, and you want something that's comfortable to fit, and you want the best helmet that you can afford, okay? Cheaper helmets, they're going to protect you, but they're just not going to protect you as well as a higher-end helmet. And the reason I really advocate spending the most amount of money you can afford on a helmet is because if you go down in a crash and you sustain a brain injury, it's unfortunate, but you're never going to be the same after that brain injury. So you're really thinking about protecting your head, and you want to protect your head with the best lid that you can get for your bike. So, you know, spend the money you can. I don't know why that slide keeps coming up every week. All right. So motorcycles. So it's not just guys who just, you know, we see riding around, you know, with tank tops and helmets on and flip-flops on motorcycles. Now this slide here is interesting because one of the things that I want to talk about is the reasons why you're more likely to be struck on a motorcycle by another vehicle. And oftentimes it's not because that other vehicle doesn't see you. There are biological reasons why other traffic and other drivers don't see you on the roadway. Studies have shown that the smaller the vehicle is and the faster that vehicle is traveling, the harder it is to determine how fast, in fact, that vehicle is driving when people are looking at that vehicle. The other thing is that as speed increases, so the faster a motorcycle is traveling, the more difficult it is to determine how far away that motorcycle is and how fast that motorcycle is traveling. So when I talked to you about that video where the person was struck by a left-turning vehicle, that's probably one of the contributing factors. The other thing is that motorcycles, you know, at least here in North America, because they're only on the road 4-5 months a year, a lot of people don't expect motorcycles to, you know, oddly enough, to be present sometimes, so they make mistakes. And as I said previously, left-hand turns, that's when you're in the most danger on a motorcycle, especially, you know, and in intersections, because 40% of crashes happen in intersections. So one of the defensive skills that you want to put in place in terms of going through intersections is you always want to be covering the brakes. You want to have your fingers over the brakes ready to go. So if you're a new rider on a motorcycle and you're looking to buy a motorcycle for the first time, these are my recommendations of what you should be looking for. And I did talk to Jared at the shop here at Vernon Motorsports here in Vernon, and I was talking to him about bikes that they recommend for new drivers. You want something that's less than 500 cc's, because you know, you get a bigger bike than that and it's just way too much power to start off with. You want something that's less than 400 pounds, and I'll tell you from personal experience, when you dump them over and you have to pick them up off the ground, it can be a real struggle to get them off the ground. And then the other type of motorcycle that you want a standard bike. You don't want a touring bike, you don't want a sport bike and those types of things. I mean, I know they look cool and those types of things, but you can get lots of really nice looking standard bikes, especially in this day and age, that are going to suit you, that are going to suit what your needs are. And again, Jared was telling me that we have here in British Columbia, anything over 400 cc's is a lot more money for insurance, and they have a bike that's a 390cc. It just falls in under the 400cc recommendation, and it comes in at less than 400 pounds, and it's a really good bike for new drivers. And as well, yes, most of you are going to spend most of your money on the motorcycle, and it's going to be kind of tough to fill in all that gear you're going to need, but there are ways to find, you know, the best gear that you can get. There's lots of motorcycle gear out there that's secondhand that you can purchase, and you know, by all means, I wouldn't recommend that you buy a secondhand helmet, but you can buy secondhand gloves and jackets and boots and those types of things. But you know, buy your helmet new. That's one of the things that I would say. Buy your helmet new and buy the most amount of money that you can afford. Certainly don't buy a $70 motorcycle helmet. I would recommend that you spend at least $200, $300 on a motorcycle helmet. And if you have other recommendations or people that could make recommendations, by all means leave that information down in the comments. That certainly helps out all the new people who are looking at getting a motorcycle and buying motorcycle gear. Okay? Pre-trip inspection. One of the things that you should do every time you get on your motorcycle is do a pre-trip inspection. You should do a quick walk around on your bike and make sure that everything is tickety-boo, especially the tires. Make sure that you haven't got something in the tires. You haven't got a nail sticking out. It isn't cracked. There isn't a low tire. It's got the proper tire pressure in it, those types of things. And as well, if you're putting a load on your motorcycle or you've got passengers on your motorcycle, you're going to have to increase the air pressure in the tires. And what you need to do is you need to look at the owner's manual for that motorcycle, and that will recommend what the increased tire pressure should be. Some of these bikes will also have adjustable shocks and whatnot. So have a look at the owner's manual and know whether you need to adjust the shocks and whatnot if you're putting passengers on and those types of things. And as part of the GLP program, if you're in the novice stage of riding a motorcycle, you're probably not going to be able to ride with passengers anyway. So know that, okay? So fuel, the last thing I'm going to say about pre-trip inspection is don't run your bike out of fuel. I know there's a reserve tank on most of these bikes, and the reserve tank goes 20 or 30 miles. Look at your individual bike for how far the bike will go on the reserve fuel. You don't want to run out of fuel on the side of the road because you don't know where that bike is going to run out of fuel, and you could end up on the side of a freeway in the middle of the day, and it's just not a safe place to be on a motorcycle. There's just you out there, so keep fuel in it. There's no reason that you need to be running out of fuel on your motorcycle, okay? All right, so good luck in your road test. Good luck with your riding. And leave a comment down in the comment section and tell me what kind of motorcycle that you're looking at purchasing to begin your riding career here. So just bear with me and I'll get back over and answer questions that we might have. There we go. And just get over to the comments. All right. CC, Dave, CC stands for cubic centimeters. It's how big the engine is. So basically, Dave, anything that's less than 500 is considered a sort of a novice bike. You can kind of get 250, 500. A really sort of high-end street bike, most most adults and experienced riders would be looking for something 750 to 1,000 cc's. Okay. Anita, yes. However, Anita, just to keep in mind that you as a car driver on the roadway, just be looking out for motorcycles. But as you said, that's a really good point of what you made is that there's nothing to protect you. Very much so. And this really underscores the point that I'm making about in terms of investing in the best gear that you can buy. And, not going out on your motorcycle wearing a pair of shorts and wearing a pair of flip-flops because there's nothing to protect your legs. And if you go down on that motorcycle, road rash, I mean, it doesn't sound like a very horrible word, but if you go down on pavement at 30, 40, 50 kilometers an hour, you're going to take a lot of skin off your legs. So make sure you're at least wearing jeans. I would at minimum wear jeans. Yeah, S. James, yes, lots of Kevlar stuff. It's really good. And as I was saying, lots of those, the jacket that Alex has, the jacket that he was showing, it actually has plastic armor in the jacket. So it has it in the shoulder pads, it has it in the elbows, it has it in the back to protect your kidneys and those types of things. So these new synthetic, Kevlar motorcycle jackets are really good at protecting you, and actually, I might even go so far to say that probably protect you better than leather jackets would and those types of things. Okay. Yes, S. James, that was a horrible video of that guy that was killed with a left-hand turning vehicle. Yes, Dave, that's a good suggestion. Thanks for that. I'll definitely do a crash analysis of a motorcycle, and we can talk about that and give you some good information about, keeping yourself safe while you're on a motorcycle. Yeah, I'm always amazed by people who never wear gloves while riding or wear shorts. Yes, I'm amazed by that too, James, for sure. But it's a little, not really that different than people who rollerblade and they don't wear wrist guards, because the first thing you're going to come down on is, if you come down on rollerblades, is you're going to come down on your wrists and you're going to break your wrists. So I do advocate if you're rollerblading that you certainly wear wrist guards and those types of things as well. Okay, hi Frank. So Frank, you still have your motorcycle license there in Michigan, do you? Okay. Excellent. That's great, Hannah. Okay, Ramesh. So I answered that question for you, Ramesh, on in terms of what the first motorcycle is. Something that's less than 400 pounds, something less than 500 cc's, and if you're buying an older bike, know that it's probably going to have standard brakes on it. If you're buying a newer bike and you can afford a newer bike, definitely look for something that has ABS brakes on it. That is certainly going to be a lot better for you in terms of learning how to drive and those types of things. And once you get the experience, once you get a year or two under your, of experience, then you can learn, then you can move up to a bigger bike. But, some of these bikes, some of these bigger bikes are just for new drivers, are just way too much to handle. And it's difficult to learn how to ride well and do all of the things that you need to do. And one of the things that you really want to learn how to do when you're learning how to ride a motorcycle is you want to learn how to counter steer, because counter steering is a lot more effective when riding a motorcycle. So, okay. Dave, that is very true, that if you are wearing the correct protective gear and you've got some knowledge about how to crash on a motorcycle, you can walk away from the crash. There are lots of these motorcycle riders who race motorcycles and they crash and they get up, get back on the motorcycle and away they go again, but they know how to lay the bike down, they know how to crash and those types of things. Now, obviously, if you're going to strike another car or you're going to strike a fixed object, it's not likely that you're going to get up and walk away from that. I mean, your chances are much, much higher, but if you're not wearing gear, you are really going to suffer a lot. And like I said, when I was young, I had a motorcycle, had a friend who had a motorcycle, and he laid that motorcycle down, and I think he was wearing jeans at the time, but he had an incredible road rash. It's just a really, and unless you've seen it, of somebody going down on a motorcycle who's not wearing protective gear, it is incredible. It just looks incredibly painful because you're just wearing the skin off your body with pavement, rough sandpaper at a very high speed. So know that as well. Well, Frank, bicycles are probably better for your health anyway. So, there you go. So Dave, yes, I will do a crash analysis motorcycle video. I'll look at some of that for you for sure. Okay. Gordon. Yes, there is. Yes, we've talked about the cool factor in terms of riding a motorcycle, and some of the veteran drivers, they need to get it all decked out and those types of things on their motorcycle. Get the right look, the right feel, the right amount of chrome on your motorcycle. You got to get matching helmet and all the gear and those types of things. So, yes. But, then there's other people who just want to ride their motorcycle and, they've got good gear and they go out and they do ride their motorcycle and they spend a lot of time riding and those types of things. And the story that I told at the beginning about this gentleman that was working at the place that I was working at and went out and bought a brand new Harley Davidson, $32,000 Harley Davidson. I said to him, "Oh, you must ride a lot. You must be like a really avid rider." He's like, "Oh, no, I just started." Which, kind of makes me laugh because, he could have spent a third of that money, got a really good motorcycle, because you can buy really nice motorcycles for less than $10,000, because lots of people get into it and then they don't like it, they don't want to ride it anymore, or they have kids or life changes or whatnot, and they just sell the motorcycle. So there's, and motorcycles aren't high mileage vehicles. Most people, here in North America, for example, they only ride their motorcycle a few months of the year, so a lot of these motorcycles don't have a lot of mileage on them. So you can pick up a fairly decent secondhand motorcycle for not too much money and have a lot of fun with it. Frank, oh my God. Yes, I've been hit on my bicycle too. I didn't have good luck when I was riding around in Australia. So yes, I know what you're saying. Yes, in Michigan, Frank, and there's other states too, Frank, where they're not required to wear helmets, but we're not advocating not wearing helmets. We are very much here at Smart Drive Test, and myself, and I know other people are very much about wearing helmets and getting the best helmet that you can get for your brain, because if you go down and you hit your brain, there is really something wrong. You can't fix that. There's just no fixing that. So okay, that's good to hear. Yes, well, and the thing about bicycles, Dave, is that you're riding at lower speeds and whatnot, but you can still get hurt on bicycles, especially get run over by a car. Air coats. Now, Dave, I'm not familiar with air coats. What are air coats? What are you talking about in terms of those? Okay, so I can do that. I can definitely look for something to do a crash analysis video on motorcycles, and I'll start looking for some of that stuff and talking about that. And yes, Gordon, $32,000 is is a nice amount to spend on a motorcycle. Another friend of mine had a Harley Davidson, and I was good friends with his wife, and I remember her saying to me that they spent, I don't know, $18,000 on a Harley Davidson, and she sarcastically said to me, "But we got a Harley Davidson." So, yes. Police motorcycles. Well, police motorcycles are touring bikes, Gordon, and they're very much decked out. And the police, I think it's harder and harder for them to find riders to ride police motorcycles, simply for the fact that they have to have so much training in place in order to be able to ride police motorcycles. And I think that's why we're seeing them less and less. And there's a great deal of expense involved in police motorcycles, because of all of the protective gear that they have to have, all of the training that's involved in putting police on motorcycles. And, the really short season, it's just not economical for them to do that, because, they're only on the motorcycles a couple of months of the year, maybe 3 months of the year at the most. Okay. So Dave, yes, some bikes only cost $7,000. I mean, you could even pick up a motorcycle, a good older motorcycle, for a couple $1,000s. Now, one of the you do need to really do some work in terms, some homework in terms of looking at the motorcycle and making sure it hasn't been laid down and there hasn't been any damage done to it. So when you're buying an older motorcycle, definitely get somebody to look at it, and definitely, have somebody check it out and those types of things. Excuse me. All right, so I think we're getting near the end here, and I think we're going to wrap it up tonight fairly easy, unless anybody else has any questions or whatnot. And where do you live? Which part of the world are you in, James, that everybody has a Harley Davidson? And I'll tell you one more story about Harley Davidson that is a really great story. Okay, so Harley Davidson. So just before I went to Australia in 2002, so it would have been the fall of 2001, I was driving truck between Cambridge, Ontario, and Dalton, Georgia. I was running carpet down to Dalton, Georgia. And for those of you who may or may not know, Dalton, Georgia, just across the Tennessee state line, is the carpet capital of the world. And I was running carpet down there, and I used to go down and see Whiskers. And Whiskers lived at the depot where we dropped the trailers and those types of things. And Whiskers had a Harley Davidson. And so every year, Whiskers and his mate would go on this big motorcycle trip. They'd go out for a couple of weeks and ride their Harley Davidsons. Well, most of the time they just sort of stuck to the back roads, the 2 lanes, and those types of things. Anyway, they were up in Minnesota, and they come down off the 2 lane, and they ended up out on the interstate for, a short distance to get into town or get down to the next road or make the connection or whatnot. So they're on the interstate, and they're 65 miles an hour on their Harley Davidson. And Whiskers telling me this story, and they're going down the interstate, and they're like, and the bikes are rattling, and they're trying to hang on for dear life on their Harley Davidson. And Whiskers said this went on for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then this guy on this BMW touring expedition bike come by them at 85 mile an hour, sitting behind his windshield, smoking a cigar, and just, and here's Whiskers and his mate on their Harleys. So that's what I always think of when somebody tells me they have a Harley Davidson. So there we go. Dave, the motorcycle that I was looking at yesterday, the 390, which is a new bike, I think it came in at $5,000. So I think you're looking for a brand new 390 motorcycle, which would have ABS brakes. It's under 500 cc, so it's less insurance. You could probably pick it up with tax for about $6,000. And then, of course, you need to factor in, probably another $1,000, $1,500 for gear. So that's where you're looking for a brand new bike. But again, you can get a second-hand bike for probably a couple $1,000s, and then you'd have another $2,000 to invest in gear and get a really good helmet and those types of things. Because, you know, probably what I would say is you probably need to spend $1,500 or $2,000 on your riding gear just to keep yourself safe. Okay? Yes, and that's James exactly what he said there. Okay, there we go. So we're going to wrap it up. So thanks so much, everybody, for showing up tonight. If you're on March break, congratulations on March break. Hope you're taking a road trip and those types of things. We're off this week. We're going to Washington State. And actually, probably this week, I'm going to do a few live feeds. I'm going down to do a video and help somebody in Washington State there with some driving. She has some issues with low vision and those types of things. So we're going to keep you informed on that and whatnot. And if you passed a road test in the last week or so, congratulations on that. If you've got a road test coming up, good luck on your road test. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a good night. Bye now.